Welcome back to the Fortitude podcast. We're your hosts, Reversing It, Sarah and
Micah.
Hey, and today we have an amazing guest you guys get to hear from. Her name is Heather Thompson Day. She's a speaker, an author. She was a communication professor. She does it all. So we're really excited for this conversation today, Heather. You have such a powerful story. Thanks so much for being here.
Man, I am honored to be here with you.
And you have your own podcast too.
I do have my own podcast. Let's go.
Yeah, that's awesome. We're on the same podcast network.
That's right. Right.
Yeah, shout out.
Yeah, that sounds fun. Network. So fun. Well, let's just kind of dive in, Heather. I would love for you to just kind of give us a little debrief of your story. I think it's so powerful. And I just kind of want to give our listeners a chance to get to know you so they know where you're coming from with the wisdom that you share, because I think that when, it's just so easy when we go through something or we have questions about our faith, we have maybe even doubts about our faith, to feel like we're the only ones and that we're having wrong thoughts.
Yeah.
Or we're sinning in some way by having doubts or questions for God about what's going on in our life. So would love to just kind of dive in with your story a little bit.
Yeah. Well, first, let me say to anybody that has questions, I think God loves questions.
Yeah.
So I studied communication for many years. I have my PhD. That's what I've taught for many, many years. And if you look at the New Testament, Jesus asks far more questions than he gives answers. And I think we should pause on that for a second.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. Jesus asks, I think it's like 307 questions. Of the 183 questions he has asked, he only directly answers 3 of them.
Oh, wow.
So God, who has all the answers, does not feel the need to give them. What he does instead is ask a question. And from a communication standpoint, that's fascinating to me, because questions, we know, build relationship. Christians, I think, love to give an answer. God loves to ask a question, because questions build relationship. So I just want to say to anybody who is, man, you're feeling bad for wanting to even say to God, where are you? Or why are you doing this? I would say God loves questions. And I would also say God will very rarely, at least in my experience, tell you what he's doing. He will just keep revealing to you who he is. So even in the wrestling, man, don't expect an answer. But expect his presence and his relationship to go with you. And so in the book, What If I'm Wrong, what kind of prompted this whole journey for me of asking myself, was I wrong, God, about who I thought you were, how I thought you had to work, or how I thought you had to respond? My dad was an evangelist. I grew up kind of in a van, traveling with him from church to church to church, watching him do ministry. And that was wonderful. And then when I turned 25, he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And by the time I think I started writing this book at like 35. So like 10 years later, at this point, his memory has deeply declined. I'm saying where I realize he doesn't know. He does know who I am. He doesn't always know my name. And my family was so poor. I mean, we were trying to figure out if anybody has loved or cared for somebody who needs full-term medical care. It's very expensive. I mean, it can be up to $10,000 a month.
Yeah.
And so I just texted my mom one day and I said, I feel like I watched Dad give his whole life to God and he has nothing to show for it. And we don't even know how we're going to afford a nursing home. And so a lot of the book is me wrestling through a God who allows the sun to shine on both the righteous and the wicked. And learning and wading through, I think my dad would have known this intuitively. I had to discover it for myself, but that God doesn't have to bless you in order for you to choose to be a blessing. And this is the truth. You don't have to perceive that God is being good to you in order for you to go be good to someone else. And because of this, blessing and goodness of God is available to all of us, regardless of our circumstances. And so I'm kind of navigating these things in the book. And to close this out, I said this to my mom. I just feel like Dad has nothing to show for it. And she said, Heather, he has you to show for it. So I think you're wrong. And it kind of just put me on this trajectory of saying, okay, what am I missing as I look through success through my earthly vision versus through spiritual heavenly vision, if I start thinking about this upside down kingdom, how am I looking at my life and perceiving failures where perhaps God is seeing success, right? And how do I retrain my brain? And so that's what the book's about, is wading through where we perceive that, I don't know what you're doing, God. I don't know where you are. I've got a lot of questions right now. But can we still experience his presence without getting an answer?
Yeah, man. I mean, that Alzheimer's, I think, is one of the most just like traumatic things that can happen. It's so painful because it hurts everybody.
Yeah.
Because I think the mind going is just one of the worst. It might be worse than like physical stuff, because at least if you have your mind, you can at least, at your last days, be with the people that you love and stuff. But the mind going is so difficult. And that's one of the ones that are really hard to grapple with, of like, God, why do you allow this to happen to people? Why, you are all powerful, and that's hard for Christians that, I mean, for Christians that have always been Christian, and people that have always believed, let alone people that are maybe new to the faith or don't have faith, and just being like, why does he, like, if this person, or not person, if this entity, if this God, if this God that you guys speak of is all loving and all powerful, why does he allow these things to happen? I think that's a common question for people. It's like, why does he allow bad things to happen? And that's the thing that really that people struggle with. And I would love to know, I mean, if you have an answer, or what your answer is, not that it's like the answer, but what would be your answer to that?
Yeah, I would say we have to get comfortable with questions. And that really is my point. That in Christianity, I think we want an answer. And I want us to sit with the fact that all of Scripture is God allowing his story to be told through other people. Jesus very easily could have written his own book. Hello, he was here. It would have taken him nothing to sit down and write a letter, and he doesn't do it. Why? There is something to this experience of human beings co-laboring with God where it is not going to be about the answers. It is going to be about people who are willing to stay comfortable in uncomfortable spaces with questions as we go on this side of earth.
Yeah.
And I just think that's the deal. And I think we have to be honest about that with people, because whatever answer we're going to give, the reality is, I mean, what do we know? We see through a veil thinly. Whatever we think we know, I guarantee you there's going to be a lot of information that we're missing. And the more you study Scripture, the more you realize that, right? The more you understand the cultural components of the first century, the more you realize, oh, this doesn't even mean what I thought it meant.
Yeah.
So the more you learn, the more you realize there is to learn.
Right. Right.
On a maybe a more practical note, when you were talking about kind of retraining your brain to how you view failures, quote unquote, and success, quote unquote, how did you start that process? Because it can be so difficult to, when we have had one pattern of thinking for year after year after year, it can be difficult and sometimes feel almost impossible to change those patterns. So when you were trying to change how you viewed failure and success and all of that, how did you go about starting to do that?
I think, I don't know that I'm there. You know what I mean? Like I'm
Totally.
still,
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I'm still having to have a lot. I tell my husband, I have to go wrestle down the bull, because that's what it feels like.
Yeah.
Almost daily, like waking up and just saying, God, like lead me today. Help me to, a prayer I pray all the time is, please align my thoughts with your thoughts. Help my thoughts to work for you and not against you. As it relates to failure, I just think, again, just going back to Scripture, Jesus enters towns in which he will be unable to do miracles. Jesus only has a 3-year ministry. So if you or I, as a human being, if I'm going to map out what my ministry is going to look like, that's going to change all of human history, I'm going to make sure that I hit stops in which I'm going to be successful.
Sure.
Jesus includes stops where he knows he's not going to be, by earthly standards, successful. And he enters the towns anyway. And so part of the thinking that I have to do is to say, it's not about being successful. It's about being obedient. Obedience is successful, I think, in the heavenly kingdom. And we are all invited, right, to operate in a heavenly kingdom.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Jesus, at the height of his ministry, I think especially as like speakers and authors and stuff, we're like, oh, but if it's working, there's going to be a crowd. Jesus drew a crowd, but they left. At the height of his ministry is 150 people. And of his disciples, nobody goes with him to the cross except John and some women, right? And mom. Is that a successful leader by earthly standpoints? So I just think we have to really zoom out. I think sometimes in Christianity, like we tell the stories over and over, and we forget what actually happened. So then we look at our own lives, and we're especially Christians. I just want to speak to anybody who is serving in podcasting or speaking or book, whatever creative fields. Man, we have got to rethink what success looks like, because I really do think it's about obedience. And you're going to have to wrestle down that bull every day, because I'm sure Jesus didn't want to enter towns where, you know what I mean? He's not by earthly means being successful, but he does it anyway. And he says to the disciples, you too will enter towns. And so you have to know when to shake the dust and when to keep going. I mean, this is the reality of the earthly journey. And so there's no shortcut and there's no cheat sheet. We're just going to have to do the work. And work by definition means exertion of my energy. That is going to exhaust me every single time. And so I think here's one thing I can say that's kind of a cheat sheet: staying in community with people who get it, who can remind you of who you are when your circumstances don't reveal it. That's hard. How do I know who I am when my circumstances aren't revealing? Am I a writer if there's not readers? You know, I just, that's tough to navigate. And I don't think you can outside of community.
Yeah. Yeah, that's absolutely, that's so powerful, because it is so easy to get wrapped up in your external earthly results that you're looking to get. And if you're not getting what you think, again, using all the air quotes, what you think you should be getting, then it's like, well, then what's even the point? I'm failing. Is it worth it? And that,
or you start to just question what you're doing.
Yes.
You start
was I wrong?
Yeah.
Was I actually called to this?
Yes.
Yeah. Is this the right path for me? Or am I making the right decisions? Is that like, and so then so speaking of questions, I feel like that's typically one that people ask themselves is like, is this my purpose? Is this, especially if they're not getting the quote unquote results that they were expecting or maybe thought that they would be doing. So how does one go about knowing that, like, no, like this is my, is it like a heart thing? Is it a soul thing of like, no, I really do. I know that I'm not getting where I think I should be or where I want to be, but I just feel it in my heart and feel it that this is a purpose that God has given me. And, you know, no matter what happens, I'm just like walking in obedience with that. So like, is that just like a daily kind of touch base? Because how does one know if they are wasting their time in doing something and they should be doing something else that is maybe more aligned with their gifts? So how does one like know that line or navigate that? Yeah,
we're talking about deep things. How do I know who I am?
That's what we do.
That is essentially like we're really saying, how do I know who I am?
Yeah.
And so here's some advice Karen Swallow Pryor gave me one time that I thought was so profound. She said, Heather, a calling comes from the outside. To be called means that there is some external to you person or like supernatural intervention where you have now been called into this thing. So for different people, I think that can be a different person. Is that a family member? Is that friends? Is that a spiritual leader who pulls you aside and says, hey, I see this for you. I want you to. So then that's somebody who's affirming what I have already felt internally. And then I would say, wait. Because it's not, I think in my experience, in the beginning, most of us, for whatever the circumstances are that have led you to believe that you were called, if that's somebody or a supernatural intervention, whatever, and it confirms my internal feeling. In the beginning, I'm like, let's go, right? I'm ready to do this. Where we start to deflate is in the middle. And so my advice to you would be, God has not forgotten. I mean, you have to remind yourself of who God is just as much as you have to remind yourself of who you are. Mm-hmm. And I in some ways too, I mean, there's just so many things, right? Because when I think about scripture, it's like Moses is 80. Mm-hmm. I mean, and literally at that interchange, he says, forget it, send someone else. And I actually think for what God was calling Moses in particular to do, it is very possible that God could not use him until Moses no longer wanted it. And I think that could be true for some of us, depending on what it is. Here's what I know. Power changes the brain. It actually physically changes the brain. It makes you, it's very close to psychopathy, actually. It makes it very hard for your brain to see people as people anymore. It makes you very hard to have empathy. So if whatever your thing is something that would coincide with some type of power, I would say expect quite the amount of time and process for God to work in your life to prepare your brain to realize only God is supposed to have power. You know what I mean? Wow. So often when you don't want it anymore, my mentor always says to me, he'll often call and be like, are you ready? And the temptation is to say, I'm ready. Yeah. And he would say, whenever you think you're ready, you're not. And he served in the White House. He was the spiritual advisor to George Bush and Bill Clinton, actually, during the Monica Lewinsky scandal. He was his spiritual advisor. But so I'm saying God has really positioned him. That's the only reason I share that. Yeah. But he says, when you think you are not ready is actually when you are ready, because anytime you're going to be used by God, we're talking about severe reliance on God, not self. Mm-hmm. And again, I think in our earthly understanding, we get that wrong.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wow.
I'm just like soaking in that.
I know.
Like, wow.
Yeah. Because that makes so much sense, because power does seem to change people if they're not.
Oh, read the research on it.
I mean,
physically changes the brain.
Yeah. That makes sense, because everybody else is also treating you differently.
Absolutely.
And so it's like, it's not just that. I think it's like your whole world totally upends and shifts, and the way that people interact with you completely shift, which I'm sure makes grooves in your brain, like neurologically, to start to think that you're different than what you were, because now you're in a different position, and now people are interacting with you differently. And I bet, and so, which is why you probably see childhood stars kind of go through a bit of a hard time in their adulthood, just because I think they're so young. They get to power at a pretty astronomical rate, and at a level where their brain is still developing and not even like fully developed. And so, and yet as humans, it's what we want. We want rich. We want to be rich.
I say that. Yes.
We want to be influential. We want to be known. We want to be all these things. And yet, like, it's the paradox of life, because we want all these things. We can't conceptualize the burden it will be, and the work that it's going to take, and really just like all the not great things that come with it. We only see kind of the sparkle stuff of it.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is? Do you think there's like, because I think because it's so universal. I mean, I think that we all have a desire in us for significance. I think there's something that God put in us where we want where significance and really that only comes through relationship with him. But that now being on earth, there is like all the earthly things that we think make us significant, that make us important. So do you think, like, why do you think there's that universal desire for that kind of significance? Do you think there is a little piece of it that comes from God that's meant to be filled by God? Or
yes.
Like, what do you think
I
that
would
comes
assume,
from?
right?
Yeah, I think, I mean, we know this. You are made in the image of God, right? Mm-hmm. Jesus says, I am the light of the world. Then he says, you are the light of the world. Jesus says he is good. He says, I have made you good. To know who God is to also start to understand who you were created to be, right? When we are surrendered in his image. So I just think it's supernatural forces trying to corrupt what God intended to be wonderful. Because you do matter. That's true.
Yes.
Every person has significance. And I'm just telling you, when you start living your life as if it's true, as if how you interact with people that day matters, something I pray every day is, God, help me to make a moment for someone today. And then I just pray that my eyes, right, align my thoughts with your thoughts, that they will work for you and not against you. And so then I kind of trust that the people that I come into contact with are intentional, right? That maybe God diverted someone's path to come across mine. And so then when I have a thought, I'm going to give you an example. I was looking at apartments with my brother last week, and the girl that was showing us the apartments was just very good at her job. I mean, I taught communications. She was an excellent communicator, a great salesman. I was just like, wow, this girl is so sharp. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to tell her. And so I just said, hey, I want you to know you are very good at this. I taught communication for almost 15 years. You have a gift. You know how to connect with people, and your messaging is very, very clear. And she said, oh my goodness, like I am wanting to go back to school. And the last time I was in school, it was for communication. So thank you so much for saying that, because I've been trying to decide if I have what it takes to go back to school, because I failed out last time. And I pointed to my husband, who his brother died when he was 19 years old. No, Seth was 18 years old. Tyler had just turned 19 years old. And so he failed out of college many times because the grief process took a lot of years, about 8 years of his life. And so I pointed to my husband. I said, he failed out 3 different times when he tried to go back. And now he's a professor. I am telling you, you have what it takes, right? So if we go through life trusting that we are God's representatives and he's calling us to be significant in other people's lives, I'm telling you, you are significant, and what you say and do matters. And you don't know how just think about something that somebody else has said to you and how maybe that changed your path or gave you confidence. Man, you get to go be that for other people. Pray for eyes to see that you don't miss it. Because babe, listening, you are significant.
And putting and being obedient with,
yes,
when you have those thoughts,
yes,
to speak them to people. Because I think, I mean, I'm guilty of this, of going around and being, and having the quick thought of oh, that was super nice of him, but then not saying it. And it's just practicing saying those good thoughts to people. Cause maybe you think it's pretty, it's just oh, that's it's not, like you said, doesn't matter. It's that's not really going to move the needle, but you just don't know where people are at and what it could do for somebody in that moment, and what that could butterfly effect. And kind of, you just don't know. And if anything, you just made their day. So you might as well, if you have the thought of somebody, or you're going about your day and somebody pops in your brain for whatever reason, I don't think that's a coincidence. I think there's a reason for that. And so reach out to them, text them, just saying hey, how you doing? Just had a thought. And it takes, a couple seconds out of your day. And I think there's reasons for that to happen. And so I'm trying to get better at that too. At just walking in obedience and having those moments of speaking when I have somebody that pops in my brain for whatever reason, and reaching out to them. So that's really good.
I call it being a creepy Christian, and I just allow myself to be one, because the worst thing that's going to happen is they're going to be like, okay, that was creepy. Why'd she say that? Oh, well, that's the word. The best thing that can happen is you answer, and I've had this happen. You say something to somebody that they have spent years or months or days in prayer about. And God sent you, and you don't know, right? You're just being obedient. But when that person goes to bed at night, they don't say, oh, Micah saw me, or Sarah saw me, or Heather saw me. They say, oh my goodness, God, you saw me. Because that's what it means to be in the image of God. God is invisible, because he is supposed to be seen through his people. So when the world says, where is God? It is not an indictment on God. It's an indictment on the church. It means we are not being image bearers, making God visible across this world. Be a little creepy Christian. And he will give you, in my experience, he will give you feedback that lets you know, oh my goodness, that was the Spirit talking to me. That wasn't me. And once you start to realize that, it is the devil's in trouble. It is game over. When you start to realize, I hear God stirring and prompting me, you won't miss an opportunity to speak to somebody.
Wow. This is kind of going back to your story and what you went through with your dad, because I think, again, a common thing that happens when someone goes through something very difficult is they maybe take a step back from faith because they're kind of like, well, this doesn't make sense to me. So why would a God who loves me let me go through this? So I'm going to sort of start to rely on myself instead of the opposite way of leaning more into him. What with your own journey, which direction did you go when it came to that? Did you have any of those like kind of like pullback moments? Did it make you just lean in immediately? What was that like for you?
I perceived, and this is why your feelings are often a liar. I perceived that God had pulled back. And I now really think God allows you to think that he has pulled back so you can step forward. And for me, that's what happened. I didn't realize it at the time, but as I'm going through this process, I'm finding, so it was actually Annie who, it was like raining one day and I was like, man, I was going to do a prayer walk and it's raining out. So now I'm not going to go. She said, are you going to let a little rain stop you from pursuing the Lord? And I was like, girl, you are right. So I like put on my little raincoat and I went outside and I started walking in the rain. And so that whole year, at that time I was living in Michigan, I used to do prayer walks always like in spring and summer. But that year, because of that conversation with Annie, it would be like, 0 degrees. And I'm putting on my coat and my boots and I'm walking in the snow before my kids get up to talk to God. And so as that process went, and really it was me desperately saying, God, where are you? Why did you leave me? Why have you done this to me? Asking all these questions. But what happened was, it's not like God was teaching me about him. I really think God wanted me to learn about me. Right? Like sometimes things get stripped away, not because you don't see God clearly. I think you're not seeing yourself clearly. And I needed to know that I am somebody who will put on boots and gloves and pursue God in the dead of night, in the cold, when it's not convenient, nor is it comfortable, nor are you even responding to me. But I'm going to keep showing up. And knowing that about myself has been just knowing that when all is stripped away, God is all that remains, has been very healthy for me if books don't sell, I just kind of, not that I don't care, but I know who I am now. And so I don't need that to confirm it for me. And I think before this experience, and this is like a 3-year process that we're condensing down into 30 minutes, in that 3-year process, I just started to change. And I'm so grateful now. And I would have never, you guys, I said some of the worst. I remember saying to God, kind of what you were saying earlier, Micah, where I just said to him, it was to my ceiling, but I just said, either you're not that powerful or like, you just don't care. It's actually making me want to cry because I remember that feeling. And God just, I mean, you guys, if you get to the end of the book, there's this massive miracle that God does in my life. And all the time, all the months and weeks that I spent walking my block, accusing God of having left me. Oh, you guys, he was right there the entire time. And that's what grief and, pain and bitterness will do, is it will cause you not to see that which is right beside you, because all I can see is my own pain. He was right there the entire time, even as I said the worst things to him. And so that has really also changed my perception, because now I'm like, like this isn't even really about me getting it right, because I didn't. All I did was stay. That I can say. I stayed and I kept showing up, but I was not the best version of myself in that process. And God continued to be the best version of himself despite who I was. God is committed to you, period.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And I think I like what you said about you're condensing 3 years in 3 minutes. So many people will hear these stories and these testimonies, and they hear. It's like it's like watching Rocky, the Rocky scene, and seeing his like the training or whatever, which you see in a few minutes, and then I don't know why we don't do this, but it's like that took years and years, and sometimes and the same thing happens with like grief sometimes, and these moments, these hard moments that you hear in a bite size story, and you think that it should happen that quickly, but that's not the process. Sometimes the process has to, it will take longer than you probably want it to, but more than anything, I think it's just hearing people's perspectives, hearing people's stories can help you know that there is another side to it and the other side to it. And a light at the end of the tunnel, I know that is such a cliche, but there's fruit that happens, and it may be in different ways that you're not expecting or that you're wanting it to happen, but there will be fruit in very different ways. We just have seen this in our life, and in the things that that Sarah's gone through more specifically than me. And it's like such a hard, like she lost her brother, and then 3 months later,
I didn't know that. I'm sorry.
That was going on?
It was almost 10 years ago.
Wow, which is actually crazy.
10 years in September.
I never even got to meet him.
Which was wild.
We met on tour, and her brother passed right at the beginning of the tour, and then 3 months later, her husband at the time came out to her as gay, and then so in like 3 months, her life just kind of was like upended, and like and that was a journey of going through grief and all that, but coming out of it, that there's been so much fruit that has happened in our life, and and in our relationship, and the things that have happened, and now we have a beautiful son that is just like the best thing that has happened to us. So.
And so much that is learned. It's like when you're in the thick of very what feels like the darkest valley you could be in, it doesn't always feel like you're learning anything. Yeah. Like it's like I feel purposeless here. What is the point of me being in this valley? And certainly like coming for me when I was in that place, coming out on the other side looked very different than I thought it was going to. But wow, did God use that time to kind of what you were saying about knowing that you're the kind of person that would put your coat and your boots on and go out and pursue him, what he did to my heart when it came to yearning for him and being like, yo, where are you? Like I need you, and I feel that you are not showing up for me the way that you're supposed to. Yes. And feeling like he was withholding from me in some way, and then coming out on the other side, and just like you said, knowing that he was right there the whole time, and being like, oh, there was a reason why I went through that to just tether my heart closer to yours, because I learned that I would kind of going back to what you said, like I would keep pursuing even when I didn't understand, even when I was bringing my difficult questions or my anger, my misunderstanding to God. It was all of that took me on a journey to be closer to him than I ever was previously. And know that his position doesn't change. Maybe it feels, he lets us perceive that it has. I love that you said that. He allows us to perceive that, but he doesn't ever abandon us despite what we might perceive. So I could rabbit hole on that for a while, but also like for when it comes to like forgiveness, things I learned about forgiveness in that time, and just the way that he allowed me to go on a journey of being like, why did I invest my life into someone who I wasn't going to end up with? Like God, you knew the whole time this was how this was going to go. Why is this? And also coming to the point of being like, there are things I won't ever know on this side of eternity, and that's mine. And I'm gonna start to be fine with that. Yeah,
you'll drive yourself crazy if you want answers for absolutely everything.
Yes.
So when you say questions, I heard you say like you ask questions, but you don't always expect an answer. You shouldn't expect an answer all the time. How do you do that? Because when you ask a question, you are expecting an answer typically. And you're like, you want one, you want an answer. So how do you even go about doing that?
And I think this is, again, I mean, this sounds very cliche, but I think only I in my book I call this bony Christians, right? People who have waited so long in the desert that it feels like they've been buried and everything's been stripped away. And the desert doesn't leave you even after you leave it, right? That it just changes how you see everything. Asking questions, I just don't know that we are going to get answers in the way that we need them or want them in this world. And I think Jesus, what I was going to say that was cliche is Jesus is the answer in the sense that God, I mean, think about even the disciples. Teacher, where are we going? Come and see. And they followed him. And so that's the ever-present invitation is not, and I can't beat this enough because I say it and I'm not sure people really receive what I'm saying.
Yeah.
He answers 3 questions. That's it. He directly answers only 3 questions. We're talking about somebody who knows all the answers.
Yeah.
There is something for us if we let it teach us, okay, what does that mean to what it means to be a Christian? And I think there's a whole other conversation. I really think we've changed what it means. I think we have become, or we think we are to become a people who have all the answers rather than a people who are willing to sit with other people in the question and say, I do not know the answer, but I'm going to go with you and we're going to see.
Yep.
And I know that God is going to be present with us in this journey. And I just think that, but you have to experience what that means to have God in your life for it to be enough. I can't tell you that. It is only something that you have to experience for yourself to allow it to be enough. Nobody else can give it to you. You know what I mean? As much as I'd like to, there's just nothing I'm ever going to say until you know that presence of God in your life, even though the circumstances aren't lining up. There's nothing I'm ever going to say until you've experienced that to understand what it means to actually say, I'm going to keep following him anyway. And here's the truth, friends. I think most people will never do it. I think it is still the narrow way. I know, we say whatever about America being a Christian nation. We have all these mega churches. I think the reality of the actual, what it means to walk in an upside down kingdom especially in America in 2025, I think it is very much a narrow path that very few will act. Not that God's not inviting. I think God invites. I think very few of us are going to say, I'm going to go through the process that's required to know God and the way that so-and-so, Moses knew him, or Moses 80 years, Joseph 17 years, right? And then when Joseph, we always are like, oh, and Joseph, he's the right hand of Pharaoh to serve in a famine. That's what he gets. 11 out of the 12 apostles are brutally murdered. I mean, I just think what we've made it and what it actually means to walk with Jesus, I think are 2 different things that we should wrestle with more.
Yeah. Well,
because else people think that they're doing something wrong. That's what bothers me. If they're not blessed and rich and super, then they're like, well, I've done it. God's mad at me. You're not doing anything wrong. This is what it actually is.
Yeah, they go. I've done this too.
Me too.
It's like it's a karma thing. It's like, well, that's because I lied, or that's because I did this one thing, and it's like, and so I'm reaping what I'm sowing.
Yes.
And so then we do that thing where, but then that's like works equals salvation. Works instead of your faith, and so it. But I'm guilty of doing the same thing where it's like, well, if I want to keep getting these blessings, so I gotta be very conscious of make sure I'm doing the right thing and doing good thing, which isn't a bad thing at the end of the day. If you're becoming a better person, I guess, but it's not about that. It's not about the works.
I think it's actually about becoming a blessing. I really mean that. We can't control what blessings we get. And some of us are just by nature of where we're born or who we're born to, you're going to get different blessings, right? But to choose to be a blessing, that is something that only a kingdom-minded person can. The wicked could never conceive of being a blessing when they don't receive one. That is only what kingdom-minded people start to think. And again, it's the upside down kingdom, narrow path.
Yeah. And I've heard from even like people that are really successful, that's where a lot of the fulfillment even comes from,
Right.
is when you start to do things for other people.
Right.
It's not the Bentley and the cars and all this stuff, which it's all nice and
Right.
can bring a form of very like
Fleeting happiness.
Yeah.
But it's not where fulfillment is.
Right.
And that's why you hear billionaires being depressed and stuff.
Right.
Like you have to have a cause that's bigger than yourself
Yes.
and for somebody else. So I think that's that component. So I agree with all that. And there was another question. Do you have something?
I do have a question.
Okay, go for it.
So how do you encourage, I'm just thinking about people in my own life, people I've encountered in the many different circles that I've walked in, like if someone is there, because what you're talking about is hard for people who would say that they've been Christians their whole life. Like what you're talking about is hard for me. And I haven't ever had a time in my life where I haven't believed or where I've fallen back or anything like it's been important to me my whole life. And that's still so difficult for me. So for someone who's maybe just starting to be like, maybe this is something, maybe faith is something I want to explore. Like I haven't gotten the answers I've been looking for anywhere else. So maybe I want to start diving into this, maybe find a relationship with God. Like, how do you encourage someone who doesn't have the like heart experience, if you will? Because just like you said, nothing that I say can help. You have to experience it for yourself.
Yeah.
So how do you encourage someone to just continue to try to pursue that?
You tell them what you've experienced. And that's my mentor. He told me that many years ago.
Yeah.
Heather, you don't have to convince anybody of anything. We are witnesses, right?
Yeah.
And a witness, Dallas Willard says this. He says, if you bring a witness to the stand, it's not to tell you what they believe. I don't care what you believe. I need to know what you saw. I need to know what you experienced. That's what you're on the witness stand for. And so I think we are called to live in these experiential relationships, right, with God and with each other. And then we just tell other people what we've experienced. And in my experience, it's enough.
Yeah.
I really think people are there. If he be lifted up, he draw people to himself. That is true. Like people will see God in you and they won't even know why they want to be around you.
Yeah.
It won't be about stuff. It'll be
They
about
will know you by your fruits.
Yes. Right. And then, there's a whole other thing on fruit to be grown. All of these things take time.
Yeah. That's true. Exactly. They'll know you by your fruits. Which if you know anything about plants,
There you go.
you're not putting a seed in the next day. The tree has apples and oranges and all this stuff. It takes time to produce that. But I do think that is more of a testimony is by people watching and seeing. I think people learn a lot more, and a lot more is caught than taught. And so people are watching and viewing and seeing, and that's more of a powerful testimony than you being like, you trying to convince somebody or saying something. And ultimately, people have to go on their own journey with that anyway. Like you can't convince anybody. Like, and I don't know if somebody's trying to convince me that their way is the right way, I'm automatically putting my walls up and kind of like, that's just like I think a human nature thing of like, don't tell me what to do or don't tell me what to think. So I think, it's not about that. It's like when you've experienced, when you've gone through it, and ultimately it comes through, it's really about going through the hard times where your faith is strengthened and to be able to lean on, a higher power and God and somebody that you believe can get you through. That's the biggest thing that where faith has been so important for us is through those hard times. I mean, when you think about going through life, like what, as humans, you ask somebody, we want this, the fame, the success, all this stuff. If it were up to us, we would have no we would have no setbacks.
Yes.
It would be this.
Me too.
Our entire life, like that's what we'd want. But then where's the learning and growth?
Right.
I think we would have zero.
Right.
We would get to the end of our life. We would have no emotional maturity.
That was fun.
We would have no roots, depth, faith, anything, because our life had just like everything is worked out. And so is that a life worth living? If you really think about it, maybe it's like, it's comfortable and it's fun, but I don't know. So much of, you hear like people's stories, and they are typically like people that are very successful. What are they talking about? Mostly that was the turning point, or that's the point that has created. It was like the cause of where they are today. It's almost always the valley,
right,
and the desert season.
Yeah.
And so I think there's just always something to that, but that's always the battle as humans, like when we're going through the valley and the desert season, to remember that.
Yes.
Because it's always not fun when you're in it, but it does help to hear those stories, to kind of like know that the other side of that. But
speaking of obedience,
Yeah.
Heather, did you always know that you wanted to write, that you wanted to speak? Like, where did your pull to like tap into those gifts of yours, where did that start and come from?
Yeah, I wanted to write since I was a child. I mean, since like 5 or 6 years old. And what's funny is I would say my speaking ministry has been far more successful than my writing ministry, which I like speaking, and I absolutely can do it, but that isn't what I am much happier sitting in my room with a computer by myself writing. Like, that's how I most experience God. But so for me, my husband was a pastor, and they asked him to do a Bible camp. And they said, could your wife come and speak to the girls? And I was a teacher, so I'd taught before, but I had never done a message before. And I was like, oh, okay, I think I can do that. Anyway, I spoke that first message, and I knew, oh, there's a gifting here. I knew it. And I was only with, I don't know, like 8, 15-year-old kids. It was a Bible camp at a small church school. But it changed my life. And then it's interesting, but so I write everything down. I keep a journal of difficulties or prayers that I'm praying. I write everything down. Anything that I think is significant from the Spirit, I write it down. And so that day that I preached my first sermon, 12 years to the day, and I talk about this is how I end the book, the Lord sent me somebody who ended up funding my entire ministry. 12 years to the day. Wow. Right. So then I saw, right, but all those years in the middle, Micah, I would have said, well, where are you? You forgot me, blah, blah, blah. And I think for me, and I think God would do this for everybody, if people just start writing it down. My suspicion is that God likes to be tracked. That way we know what he's done. And often we just say, well, I've had so many students that are like, I've prayed and I've cried and I've tried, and I don't feel anything. And I'm like, how long have you prayed? And they're like, 3 months, right? Or it feels in the moment, it feels like 3 years, but it's actually 3 days. So writing things down, I have found that God will keep anniversaries with you that you have long since forgot. Had I not written that down, I would have never realized that he sent this multimillionaire to invest in me 12 years to the day that I preached my first sermon. I mean, that is like, so now, because I have those like moments with God, and I have multiple of them, I don't have to question. Even if the response isn't what I want it to be, it's like, but I know this was God. I know. And so then it's just about a matter of obedience, and how do I keep showing up?
Yeah, that's so good. You're inspiring me. I should write things down more.
I cannot recommend it more. Please keep the dates. Yeah, be a creepy Christian. Write it down. Keep the dates. Like, I track him.
Creepy Christian.
Yeah.
Trademarked.
Funnily enough, when we were So we met doing the Beauty and the Beast national tour. We used to do musical theater professionally, and that's when my brother passed away. That's when my husband came out to me as gay. That was like, it was all during that. And I already decided that on that tour, I was going to keep a journal. So I wrote in a journal every day on that tour, even before I started going through difficult things. And then it just so happened that those things happened to me in that time when I was being very diligent about writing down what I was experiencing, writing down prayers, writing down when I was grieving. And it is, I mean, I have had, in going back to reading that journal, I wrote down prayers that I don't remember praying.
Right.
That God has answered. That
Right.
I didn't even realize were an answer to something that I prayed so specifically for that I never would have remembered.
So
that
specific.
If I hadn't have written it down. So, I mean, I too, even in my little bit of writing things down, I have evidence of what he has done and how he has worked in my life. So, and now I've tried to be more diligent with writing things down since we've had our son, especially.
Yeah.
So to, I think there is definitely something so powerful about being able to go back and be like, holy moly, like
it's like your receipts.
You really came through. Yeah.
Okay, I want you guys to go through my book because my dad was on Broadway. He was in Jesus Christ Superstar and Hair.
Oh,
and
wow.
so he left to pursue ministry. And so anyway, my house was always a very creative household and filled with music. And so anyway, I connect to you guys now even more, knowing that you were both in traveling theater. I love that.
That's amazing. Wow, who do you play in those?
He was Simon in Jesus Christ Superstar, and I have no idea in Hair because he, in Hair people are like naked, swinging on rope. So I've never seen it, and he didn't talk about it. But I can find the playbills because sometimes we share.
Wow,
those.
that's amazing.
Yes,
that's really cool. That's really cool. Wait, what's his name, if you don't mind?
So his name was Bobby London. His stage name. His name is
London.
Joel Thompson.
Bobby London was his stage name. Okay,
Yes.
so if we looked him up, okay.
Yes.
I'll have to check him out. That's really cool. Wow, what a small world. Well, is there anything that you haven't touched on that you like really want to touch on? I want to be respectful of your time.
No, but I love you guys.
Oh, we love you.
I've appreciated hearing your story. I guess I'm the interviewee, but I've appreciated hearing more of your story. I think I just think this podcast is important.
Oh, well, I mean, we appreciate your time and just like being willing to share everything that you shared. And I think this is a great conversation.
There's a lot of meat here.
Yeah.
Even for me, even what
we definitely learned a
so
lot.
much. And even just to sit, it's like, I don't know, some of the things that you've said, Heather, it's like how I feel when I'm reading the Bible, where I hear one thing and I'm like, okay, I need to like be on this one thing for a while, because I don't think I'm fully realizing what it means. And I've never heard anyone talk about scripture the way that you're talking about scripture when it comes to questions and answers.
Yeah.
I didn't know any of that. And I think that's a wild thing to meditate on.
Yes.
As a Christian.
Yeah.
So thank you for
my honor,
your wisdom and your story. Where can people find you? Tell us.
Yeah, if you just go to heatherthompsonday.com,
okay,
everything will be there. My
and
ministry's there. Of course, I'm on Instagram at Heather Thompson Day.
Okay, awesome.
Easy peasy. We'll link everything in the show
Thank you
notes
so much.
for people so that they can easily find you. But thank you so much again. This was.
So, are you guys still performing, or?
In a different way.
Okay.
We had sort of taken a step back from performing this was before the pandemic. We were like, okay, because we met and then like our relationship was getting more serious and blah 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 blah. So then we were like, how can we love performing, but what kind of life does it really provide for us? Is it conducive to us building a healthy marriage, building the future that we're excited about? Do we have gifts in this area, but we feel like God has more for us as well, but we don't know what it is. So we just kind of put it on the back burner because it's so mentally, physically demanding. We were kind of like, we need to free up some bandwidth so that we can figure out what else God has for us. And so we knew we wanted to ideally be able to work for ourselves, have a little more control over our time. And then long story short, we pursued some different things in 2021. Pandemic was still going pretty strong in New York City. We weren't able to do much. Micah was at home all day long. he started posting just like silly skit videos on TikTok. One exploded, and it turned into this whole thing where now like our social media is our full-time gig. And
that's wonderful.
It's also our outlet kind of to perform.
Yes.
Like we get to perform because we do a lot of singing videos, dancing videos, and skit based, and so it's just been cool because we've been able to kind of use the giftings that God's given us and kind of the training that we've done and being able to do it on our own time. But I will say, we are starting to get the itch to kind of do it again. And so if you're a producer or a director that's listening to this.
Yeah. But I want to tell you, my dad, he did a show when he left Broadway. He created this show. It was and it sounds wild, but I'm hoping you guys might catch the vision just because of your background. It was a one-man show, and it was called Jonah. And he went through the whole story of Jonah, but acting and singing and production, everything, but just him. And he played all these different characters.
Yeah.
But you guys, it was so powerful. Anyway, I'm just throwing this out there. You have no idea what God may call you to.
Right.
There is he that's all he did was travel around all over internationally and here to different churches and did this show.
Wow, that's cool.
That's really cool.
And so I just wonder, I don't know, what could God be calling you guys into? That's so different.
A two-person show?
Could that not?
We do the entire thing of Les Mis, just us two.
See? You're already, the groundwork is there.
Wait, you got me thinking.
Wheels are turning.
You guys, I know it sounds, I'm telling you, the show was incredible. It was so good.
I bet.
And if you're talented, you can make it work. And people were just like, oh my gosh, I've never seen the Bible in this way as he did it.
Very cool. Well, now you've planted a new seed.
I'm hoping.
Yeah,
I want to see you out.
There.
I want to book tickets. I'm in Texas. I want to book tickets to go to the theater in Texas and Dallas and see you guys. And I'm going to say, I knew them. I knew them win.
That would be so fun. We had a nice conversation on the podcast. That's awesome. Well, I mean, that's definitely something to think about because, like, we've been definitely getting the itch to perform again and just trying to figure out like
you're
what
not
that
going to. That's
like.
who you are. I just think those things are like that's who you are.
Yeah, yeah. It was like because we took a span of time off from it to like really kind of get our financial stability in place or whatever. But I will say like during that time, it was like there was always this kind of like thing inside. It's just like I miss it so much. Like I feel like I'm thwarting this kind of thing that God is putting in us. And so to be able to kind of do it again has been fun. But now we want to kind of do it like traditionally again because the social media thing is great and like we have a lot of fun with it. It's just kind of different.
I mean, there's
Absolutely.
nothing like being on stage.
Right.
There's nothing like it.
So
so
we might be coming to a city near you.
I hope so, guys. I'm gonna pray for you.
Okay, thanks so much, Heather.
Appreciate that.
Thank you so much for your time and for everything that you shared. And as always, guys, if you haven't yet, follow us, subscribe, follow Heather, subscribe, because it just really helps the algorithm out. And if this really impacted you and you think that it would impact somebody else, share it with them, because that's the whole reason why we do this. Is to help others feel less alone in what they're going through, as well as hopefully helping them out,
encouraging
them. So, yeah, great.
Woohoo!
All right, thanks, friends.